want to share with you my feelings and emotions upon the release of the first 3 Israeli hostages. These are my feelings. I do not presume to speak or feel for everyone. If you connect with my sentiments, then perhaps we're kindred spirits. And if not, you have plenty of company. 1, I felt enormous pride. Jews are an amazing people. We are contentious, argumentative, noisy, obstinate, stiff-necked, temperamental, stubborn. We are independent and contrarian to the point of exasperations. Strong emotions constantly churn inside of us, and we wear our passions on our sleeve. We can be prone to deep anxiety, even neurosis, which, given our history, I suppose is understandable, and has in turn produced in us a wicked, cutting sense of humor. We can be exceptionally hard on one another and exceedingly impatient with each other. Let's be honest. We often drive each other crazy. But we're an awesome people. To truly know ourselves, we must recognize not only our flaws, but also our greatness. Israel stopped last Sunday. The entire country sat glued to the television, awaiting with bated breath the first glimpse of the 3 young women freed from hell. The same scenes will be repeated tomorrow, when an additional 4 women are expected to come home. A people that couldn't breathe for 16 months finally exhaled for one brief moment at first sight of the 3 hostages. Everyone considered these 3 young women their own daughters, their own sisters, their own family, their kin. I streamed the wall-to-wall television coverage on Sunday. I did it on 2 Israeli channels, and I divided my screen. When the hostages emerged from the Hamas vehicle, and especially when the IDF announced that they were safely in Israeli hands and would soon cross the border, the entire country broke down in tears. Skeptical broadcasters and tough security analysts, many of whom have seen fierce combat, they wept openly on set. They recited prayers. Secular television anchors recited Shechianu, as if recapturing long-suppressed Jewish piety. This sentiment of mutual responsibility, despite all of our internal disagreements and debates, it's what defines us. We are Beit Yaakov, the house of Jacob, the family of Israel. And if you do not feel this, you have no idea what you're missing. And you will never fully understand what it means to be a Jew. It's comforting to know that you are part of a nation that will never rest, never tire, and pay exorbitant ransom to pluck you out of Hades and redeem you. There's something unbreakable and eternal about us. It's legitimate to debate whether the price for the restoration of the first 33 hostages, some of whom are probably no longer alive, it's legitimate to debate whether it's worth the risk. Many of the prisoners Israel will release in the coming weeks have blood on their hands and will go right back to plotting, killing Jews. Still, only a strong people, a caring people, a nation that can never be vanquished, will trade hundreds of terrorists and murderers, the worst people on earth, for the incomprehensible ratio of 30-1 in exchange for the redemption of the men, women, children, grandparents, and babies, some of whom will return in body bags for proper burial, who were stolen from their bedrooms and dragged into the dungeons. To look into the eyes of the three women, to observe their courage and dignity at the moment of their release, surrounded by dozens of masked terrorists and hundreds of seething Gazans chanting, "Kill the Jews," to witness their reunion with their families, to observe this outpouring of love and support and emotion from the entire nation is to understand the strength of the human spirit. They survived hell for almost 500 days. The most iconic symbol of the resilience was that of Emily Damari, seized from her home in Kfar Aza, holding up her bandaged hand upon release, missing 2 fingers that she lost on October 7th. Did you see that? Those of you who haven't seen it, go look her up and look at the pictures. This is the Jews, a people that can never be vanquished. No matter what calamity we endure, we rise from the ashes, battered and bruised, to live and fight another day. We sanctify life. Our enemies interpret this unique sensitivity to human suffering as a weakness. They constantly underestimate us and condemn themselves to a life of misery and defeat. On our rabbinic mission to Israel last week, we met with 86-year-old Yocheved Lifshitz. She and her husband, Oded, were seized from their home in Kibbutz Nir Oz. Oded is still a hostage, and his family fears that he's no longer alive. Yocheved described the horrors of that day. Masses mobbed our homes. They beat people and took hostages. They didn't distinguish between the young and the elderly. They brought us to the tunnels, and we walked many kilometers on wet dirt. A peace activist her entire adult life, Yocheved told us that some 3 or 4 days after they arrived in the tunnels, Yehia Sinwar himself came to them. Yocheved turned to him and asked, "Are you not ashamed to do such a thing to people who have supported peace all these years?" What was his response, we asked. He didn't answer me. He just remained silent. Sinwar's deafening silence defines Hamas. Silent to human suffering, silent to efforts towards peace and reconciliation, silence to injustice, silence to everything good and noble in this world, just perpetual war, fanaticism, and cruelty. And I thought to myself, the imbalanced scales of justice have moved slightly, but perceptively. Sinwar is dead. Yocheved is alive. She has children. She has grandchildren. We met some of them. Yocheved's people is alive. 2, the second experience that I had was what I've had since October 7th, which is periodic, intense opportunities, intense bouts of intense anger. It ebbs and flows along with all the other powerful emotions surging through me. It comes in an instant, an unannounced and unwanted chaperone to my post-October 7th days. Honestly, I think it's a lingering sign of trauma. Why anger? We have normalized evil. This drip release of 33 hostages over the coming 5 weeks, after the drip release of 125 hostages last year, while 91 will remain captive after the first phase of this deal, only 57 of whom are believed to be still alive. All this has become a kind of perverse morality play considered by so many to be a fair and equitable outcome. We've been lulled into the normalization of the abnormal and acceptance of the unacceptable immorality. I support this deal for Jewish and humanitarian reasons, as well as many others related to the cohesion of Israeli society and world Jewry. If there is no choice, there's no choice. We need to get our people home. There can be no recovery without their return. Redeeming the captives has been a central Jewish value for centuries. Still, this deal stinks. Reflecting on the past 16 months, I constantly come back to the basic questions I asked myself on October 8th. Where are all the right-minded people of the world? Why didn't university presidents and faculty and student bodies and feminist organizations and international legal establishments and governments and the media and the literary community and school principals and local city councils and fellow clergy with whom we have worked for decades, why didn't they come out with a basic demand? Return the hostages. You stole them. You stole people. Return the hostages, not in compensation to concessions to evil. Return them or else. Where were all the right-minded people who spilled onto the streets of the West after Boko Haram kidnapped Nigerian school children in 2014, demanding, "Bring back our girls"? Why weren't the Israeli hostages considered ours? Why didn't they consider them our girls, our boys, our parents, our grandparents, our brothers, our sisters? Why didn't all these right-minded people hold Hamas responsible for the suffering of Gazans? Terrorists launch a war, invade a country, kill, kidnap, massacre, and brutalize thousands. And some of those supposedly right-minded people deliriously proclaimed early on that this is what legitimate resistance looks like. And then they condemned the efforts to to defeat these barbarians who's used their own people as human shields. We don't expect much from Hamas. But what about you in the West? You feel nothing for Israeli victims? And your legitimate concern for the innocents harmed in Gaza never leads you to demand that Hamas return the hostages and surrender? You make up blood libels of genocide, but do not demand the one thing that will stop the suffering? And what happened to all those accusations of genocide now that Hamas is back in force on the Gaza streets? And the masses surround every released Israelis with threats to kill the Jews, terrorizing hostages one last time in macabre displays of machismo and bravado. From genocide to victory in a week? And you are silent in the face of screams to kill the Jews? Since October 7th, you've been demanding a ceasefire, even before Israel actually responded? And now you say nothing? When Hamas and Gaza mobs call for jihad? A war of destruction against the Jews? And when they promise to repeat October 7th over and over and over again, you say nothing now? Genocide last week? This cocksure hypocrisy and faux moral virtue signaling, infused with elements of historic anti-Semitism, is infuriating because we still expect more of you. We still believe in you. We were taught Western values together in the class. I want to reiterate what I have said dozens of times. The loss of any innocent life is a moral catastrophe. I empathize deeply with non-combatants in Gaza and Lebanon who have been killed, maimed, and dislocated. I mourn for them and pray that one day their leaders will pave the way to a life of dignity and prosperity for them. I will continue advocating for the realization of this goal. But remember, the sad but incontrovertible truth is that this war is not against Hamas alone. That would be like saying that World War II was a war against the Emperor of Japan. The sad truth is that Hamas does represent Palestinian nationalism. Hamas is broadly popular in both Gaza and the West Bank. And you young people who are here, university students, 20-something, those of you online, the next time you encounter what is described as a pro-Palestinian protest, ask one of the demonstrators whether they believe in coexistence. Do they support the existence of a Jewish state in its ancestral home in any border? And then let me know what you find. It's Palestinian ideology that needs to change. The defeat of Hamas is only the first step. Then comes the much harder task of expunging the hatred of Israel as both German and Japanese nationalism were tamed of their worst impulses after World War II. 3, as I sense and hope that this war is finally coming to an end in the coming weeks, I feel renewed determination to get right what we got wrong before October 7th. We failed to communicate adequately to younger Jews that Zionism the millennial yearnings of the Jews to restore sovereignty, dignity, and self-determination to our people in the land of Israel, Zionism is integral to Judaism. It's been our central aspiration for 2 millennia, and implicit in every biblical verse, every prayer, and every Jewish text. And therefore, the war against Israel is also a war on the Jews of the West. I am determined to make a difference post-October 7th. That's why we were in Israel last week, investing in the next generation of Jewish leaders. The purpose of the Rabbinic Fellowship that we launched 2 years ago and has now touched 36 early career Reform rabbis is to remind our movement of that which we have not learned sufficiently in our synagogues, schools, summer camps, and even the rabbinical seminary. That Jewish peoplehood and Zionism are at the heart of the contemporary Jewish experience. It's a contradiction in terms to be an anti-Zionist rabbi. We were the first group to travel to the north of Israel in the past 16 months. The first. And we were granted special permission to enter Kibbutz Manara on the Lebanese border. Anybody happen to have been there once? The distance between the destroyed house that we stood in and Hezbollah terrorists who patrolled the other side of the fence until last fall is the distance between where we sit now and Columbus Avenue. Orna, a longtime Manara resident, walked us around the kibbutz, stopping to point out the destroyed houses and fields. And we spent some time with her, and after a couple of hours, her parting message to us was, think of us, join hands with us. This is how you do tikkun olam. I'm more determined than ever to remind younger Jews that this is how we do tikkun olam. To repair the world is also to repair the Jewish world. It is to join hands with our brothers and sisters in Israel. Tikkun olam includes lifting the fallen of our people and restoring Jewish well-being. And I want us to be part of that effort of rebuilding. We're organizing a special 5-day study in solidarity and mission to Israel in May. Get on the plane. Get on the plane. Get on the plane and come with us. I want you to know. By the way, registration is open now, as of an hour ago. Get on the plane. You'll thank me for the rest of your lives. I want you to experience the pain, the resilience, and our bond with fellow Jews as we rebuild our shattered lives. I want you to experience on your flesh the glory and the miracle of a Jewish state that our ancestors could only dream of. There'll always be a hole in our hearts that I think will never fully heal. But Israel will rebuild, hopefully even better than before. We need to be part of that. Get back to Israel. It's not good for Jews to be away for too long. Our synagogue will return on a family mission to Israel in December. Look for the announcements. It's not open yet, but it will be. Bring your kids and come with us. We spent a couple of hours on Kibbutz Nahal Oz near the Gaza border and walked through a small house where an entire Israeli family was murdered. As I was walking through the destroyed house, I kept on imagining what that last moment of terror, being attacked by masked murderers, must have felt like as they stormed the peaceful and tranquil home. Outside on the wall of the house, the kibbutzniks hung a large portrait of the murdered parents and their 2 murdered children, along with a caption. Lo nishkach velo nislach. We will not forget, and we will not forgive. The pain, the sorrow, the grief was palpable. The kibbutz, previously humming with life, joy, and the laughter of children, was eerily silent. There were few people, hardly any noise, mostly the sounds of drones buzzing above our heads and the periodic rumble of artillery. But a little distant onwards from the hushed house of horror, perhaps 100 yards further on, amidst the destruction and rubble, a man was digging the foundations of his new family home to replace the one burned to the ground. It symbolized for me days to come. In the words of the prophet Isaiah, Uvanu vatim v'yashvu, and they shall rebuild ruined houses, and they shall dwell in them. They shall plant vineyards and eat their fruit. The voice of weeping shall no longer be heard. No more shall infants live out their years, not live out their years until the end of their lifetime. The wolf and the lamb shall graze together. There shall no longer be destruction in the land. Nothing evil shall be done.